getting better equals getting uncomfortable. And generally when I have a big idea, one of the things that's important is that I have some kind of thesis that I want to present to you and just briefly defend. And if I had the thesis for today, that thesis is that human success is not just striving, but optimizing. I talk a lot about optimizing. I don't like to talk about right or wrong. I like to talk about optimal decisions. I like to talk about how can we be the best that we can be. Unfortunately, as human beings, our instinct most often leads to something that has been referred to as satisficing, which is a term that was coined by Herbert Simon, who was a Nobel Prize winner. Satisficing is something that combines the satisfactory and sufficient. So we tend to accept something that is less than optimal. And this is part, I'm going to argue, and I think it's true, it's part of our evolution as human beings. This is just what we do. It doesn't make sense, though. If we're looking for optimization, if we're looking for true success, then we cannot always live in this world of satisficing. We cannot just do what is sufficient and satisfactory. We have to challenge that on a regular basis. We have to, in some cases, embrace discomfort. Now, discomfort is also, to some people, pain, which means that we have to sometimes embrace pain. And that's counterintuitive. We didn't grow as human beings, evolutionarily and through our mental evolution for that. It's something that we have this VUCA world, and in the VUCA world, we have to do different things. We have to experiment. We have to try, which means that we can't always be complacent. And so this term satisficing was pretty interesting. When I came across it, there was a story behind it. And the story behind it was one that came to us from the London, from a strike in London, where they had the London tubes went on strike, and a bunch of people in London had to find new ways to commute to work. And it was an interesting real life experiment. And what they found is this. And I'm going to quote from, there's some links actually to some of these stories in the comments that I put in ahead of time. One of the co-authors, Dr. Ferdinand Rausch from Oxford's Department of Economics, Oxford, right? Smart guy. Got to be a smart guy to get into Oxford. Our findings illustrate that people might get stuck with suboptimal decisions. I love the word because that's the one I would use, because they don't experiment enough. We talk a lot about experimentation in the Agile world, in the VUCA world. According to the authors, when folks were forced by the strike to alter and experiment and try different ways of commuting to their work in London, this is in 2014, they found that a high percentage of people, more than they would expect, were able to cut down on their commuting time. So the interesting thing about this satisficing is sometimes we're thrown into it, as these people were in the London tube strike. You're thrown into a situation where you have to do something different. It gets you out of your routine. What I'm going to argue is that we shouldn't wait until the world disrupts us. We should embrace those changes. And no more so than the folks who have spent some time with us. And I know we get some people who are here every week and follow us after the fact because it's on LinkedIn all the time, is AI. AI is disrupting the world. And my guest last week, and I agree, Ian, said, hey, look, let's not wait for AI to disrupt our job. Let's embrace AI. So again, this is a perfect example of modern day embracing change. But I want to go through a couple other stories just to give a little flavor for it. The first one is Tiger Woods. I think most people are familiar with Tiger Woods. He's a very famous golfer. Tiger Woods was always looking for a longer drive. That's the tee shot. He wanted to be able to hit it as far as he could, and gaining 5 to 10 yards could make the difference between a stroke or two in a game, and that can make the difference between winning or losing a tournament. And he was a very dominant golfer for the young folks out there who might not have seen him. I've seen him play. It's incredible. And he had, and I didn't know it was this many, but he had like 4 or 5 coaches that he used during the 90s and early 2000s who worked with him on his swing to improve it, even though he was the best golfer in the world already. That kind of thing is really, really interesting, because the reason I wanted to talk about this topic, I told this story to a group of developers I'm working with in Poland. We were in our retrospective and we talked about, we were talking about experiments, and they said, well, I'm not comfortable doing this. I said, yeah, but sometimes we have to be uncomfortable. Even Tiger Woods made himself uncomfortable when he was the best in the world. He made changes to his swing when he was the best in the world, just so he could be better, right? So he could be optimal. I like that. He had that quest. Maybe, some people say it was kind of an obsession with him to be the best golfer in the world, to have the longest drive in the world. But he did it nonetheless. And he had to change his swing many times. He had a lot of health concerns. He had to change his swing. He embraced the change, even though he was already the best in the world. I think we all know the story of Michael Jordan. When Michael Jordan walked away from basketball to play baseball. And I don't have this in my notes because I want to talk about another person who did the same thing earlier than Jordan. I don't know if Jordan was familiar with Mike Reed's story, but the interesting thing for me personally, I have a personal connection to both the Mike Reed story that I'm going to tell you shortly and to the Michael Jordan story, because I lived, some of you know, I lived in Scottsdale for almost 25 years of my life, and Michael Jordan ended up playing his minor league ball in Scottsdale. It was quite the sensation, obviously, in Scottsdale when he walked away from a successful basketball career to pursue a career in baseball. Now, it didn't work out great for Michael Jordan as a baseball player. There's no guarantee that when you become uncomfortable, you're going to do something better, right? If you knew the results of an experiment, why even experiment? It's not an experiment. But I wanted to talk about a different person, and again, this is somebody I have a very, very small personal connection with, but it just, to me, those are interesting, right? And I don't know if you'll find it interesting, but I remember I was with my uncle a long, long time ago, and we were running some errands or something like that. And we stopped by the house of the guy's name is Eddie Shepard. I don't think anybody would know him. He owns some restaurants in Cincinnati, where I was from, and I was in Cincinnati at the time. And I was a big country music fan, still am. And we were in Eddie Shepard's house, and all of a sudden somebody walks in the door, and it was Mike Reed. And I knew who he was. I mean, I was a football player. I talk a lot about football and sports. I knew who he was because I was a country music fan, because at the time he had just written some #1 hits for Ronnie Millsap, The Stranger in This House, and others, if you're familiar with country music. He wrote those songs. But he was, before he was somebody who eventually was inducted into the I think it's a Country Musicians or Country Songwriters Hall of Fame. He was a football player, and he was one of the best football players that you could find. He was an All-Pro, and back in the late '60s, he did what Michael Jordan did. He walked away because he was also a concert pianist. And he walked away from football at the height of his career to become a musician. A lot of people didn't understand it, and it wasn't easy for him. But in his case, it worked out, because I am sure among a lot of people, and maybe he's older now and it's been some time. I don't know if he's still active writing music, but he's probably better known for the songs he wrote than for his success on the football field. But he was a Cincinnati Bengal, and I ran into him. He walked in the door. It was great. I got to see him and meet him, but I was excited because he was a country music songwriter and singer. And I was also excited because he was a football player, but I was more excited that he was a country music song. So here's the bottom line, and I'm put a cap on this because I'm running out of time on my big idea here. In this VUCA world we live in, where volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity reign, our instincts are going to push us in the way of satisficing. However, we need to often do, and I gave a talk about this, it was the last week before, we have to do the counterintuitive thing because our intuition doesn't work for this VUCA world. And true success lies in yielding, not yielding to the comfort of the adequate, but courageously embracing growth that comes from facing the uncomfortable time and time again.